Hi, this is a week 4 supplement for Straight Line's Executive Black Belt course. This one covers the nuts and bolts lean tools for the week 4 slides, starting at slide 36.
Okay. Now I want to spend a little bit more time talking about what I call nuts and bolts lean tools. These are just the basic tools. Now, one of the things that when people study what has happened in lean in America as opposed to other places is there's an overemphasis on tools. Did you use this tool? Did you use that tool here in America? All right, having said that, there are some tools that are so multi-purpose that they really repay over and over. So I want to go through what those tools are, at least in my book. Some of the most valuable ones are value stream mapping, and we'll talk about this. We already talked about value stream mapping from a high level, but there's a high and low level. High and detailed, I should say, detailed level. Okay, there's both of those. I'll leave this on. Oops. Where was I? Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so the value stream map has both of those. We'll also take you through something called process analysis and waste walk. I think that these will be very obvious when you look at them. The question is sort of when you want to use them. Value stream map can be used multiple times. It can be used at a high level, like I said, high level, and also at a detailed level. So the high level analysis can be done early in a project, or it can be done even prior to a project to help select that project. That's the ideal situation. Process analysis, the way that we present it, is only going to be done at the detail level. So it's appropriate when you've already really examined and found a problem with a specific point in the process. What we call 5S, that again is a detail level practice. And the same with waste walk. The waste walk can be done early, but is also a detailed level. Generally speaking, is a detail level tool. Okay, so these tools can get you from fairly high level to fairly detailed stuff. So let's cover them through. As I said, lean tools are really about seeing and eliminating waste. Let's talk first about value stream map. And again, value stream mapping, there are many books, and there are many ways in which people are proponents of value stream maps. The way that I like to think of a value stream map is think of it kind of like, we all know what a regular process map or flow chart is. Think about it as a flow chart on steroids. And if you start about thinking as it that way, you'll start to realize that maybe it's just additional components that are put into a process map. So let's talk through, here's a methodology on how to do that. Instead of doing that, let's talk it through in a picture of what a value stream map is, because it can be very daunting if you haven't seen one before. So here happens to be a picture of a value stream map, and let's talk it through in terms of everything that's here. So one thing you'll notice is that there are many symbols. I would again encourage you that when you do your value stream maps, not to use so many symbols, because symbols can often get in the way of communication, and therefore get in the way of other people visualizing and understanding what the problems are. So I would say use them sparingly. Well, we'll talk through what's here. Believe it or not, this really is at its heart simply a process map, and a rather simple one at that. This happens to be a value stream map for underwriting at a financial services company, and for approving policies at a life insurance company. And think about that. Okay, so first of all, I want you to note that, and we'll just kind of go from the bottom up, that maybe I should have said this first, but the process steps are given, basically the internal process steps are given right here. I'm just going to mark them in red. I should use my pen. How about that? If I use my pen, do a better job. There we go. Okay, so this is maybe step 1, and step 2, and step 3, and step 4, and step 5. These would be the internal steps, and maybe even step 6 if we're talking about shipping as well. So if we looked at it internally, the process would be I enter data, I get my requirements, I do my risk assessment, I do my inspection of the policy, I do my inspection, I do a policy assembly, and then I ship it. Okay, so that's the process itself. At the bottom, just to show you what's here, we often put in timing data. And you can see that the top is usually, there's usually non-value added and value added. This is actually the task time for each of the different process steps you can see. And then on the higher level is the delay. So this one takes 45 minutes to do, and then there's a 20-day delay after it, after which there's a 10-minute process, after which there's a 3.5-day delay, a 2-hour process, and so on, right? So something like this, if you've identified, can really show you, oh my goodness, there's a 20-day wait. Maybe that's really hurting the customer. Okay, second thing is there's also some process data that's usually put on here. Okay, and that process data is, it varies by the type of process that you have, but basically it uses many of the lean metrics that we talked about before. Here, in this particular process, it gives us the cycle time, that's what CT is, the batches that are used, in this case maybe a batch of 50. Apparently the uptime of this particular thing is important because that can certainly cause delays. And that's given at 90%. So that could be even IT uptime. And this bottom thing, which is called IGO, stands for in good order. That's a percent good. So that's percent good that's coming through here. So we can see, for example, if we want to look at processes that take a long time, this particular process takes the longest time at 120 minutes. They all have batch sizes of 50. They all have 90% or greater uptime, but one of these has a very low in good order. Actually, two of them do. That one's got a problem with in good order, and that one's got a problem with in good order. So that's like quality level. Okay, so that can help us understand maybe what's wrong with this process and give us an idea of where to work on, and where and what to work on. The third thing that's on here that may look a little non-standard to you is inventory levels. So these little triangles right here are given for data that's in progress, or stuff that's going between, that's done with 3 and waiting to start at 4. We'll find that one of the wastes that we look for in lean is inventories. So this can help us understand where inventories are great. So look at this right here. It looks like right here we're batching up. We're allowing ourselves to get up to 2,000 policies. And maybe that's what's really causing the problem with the delays. So it's helping build that picture in a meaningful way. Oops. Now, many of these other things are sort of optional I think, as I've seen. I don't always see them in value stream maps. In fact, I don't always see inventory, although I think it's usually a good idea to indicate work in progress. But scheduling and things like that, where the scheduling is coming from, is often noted. Some people want to use some people use it's been a while, but some people, instead of putting just a straight arrow, would put we'll put an electrical looking arrow for electronic transfer as opposed to just regular transfer. Oops. And so forth. Okay, and then usually up at the top. So if we kind of strip this a little bit and strip out some of the stuff that's kind of getting in the way. Oops. We've got just a few different elements that we care about. First of all, here are the suppliers and customers. Here is the process itself. And then these arrows are kind of showing where things are pushed. See that arrow is pushing this way into various places. Okay? So, and then there's just additional data that's put on here. Timing data, process data, queue data, and scheduling information. Okay, so what can you do with a value stream map? Well, if you have, and here's, by the way, here's our lightning bolts. You see those lightning bolts right there? That's what I was talking about before. So if you have, remember we said one of the key things was to let the customer pull. One of the things that a value stream map can do is it can really help you understand where various wastes are happening and help you understand how to build a pull system better. So this happens to be for a different company. You can see that here they're doing milling, and welding, and painting, and assembly. But it allows you to start with getting a big picture of where your delays might be, where your inventories might be, and where you might be able to design pull systems as opposed to push systems. Okay, so you might be able to design a before and after, and or a current state, and then what the future state might look like. You can see that this is cleaned up quite a bit more. You've got all this scheduling that's going on in the middle of the process. Here you've moved it to the ends, which is more efficient. And instead of these arrows, which are push arrows, you've got pull arrows, which essentially that usually helps you a lot with inventories. So that essentially says whenever we're out of materials from milling, that's when we're going to pull from the supplier. Or there may be rules around that. We'll discuss inventory management much later in the course. And reorder points and all that kind of good stuff. But you can see that that can reduce a lot of waste. Think about it in terms of if you're in the medical practice or medical or healthcare provider side. Think about maybe how wasteful it would be to push a patient through into a room which is not cleaned, or to push a doctor to there as well. To a room which is not prepped and patient's not ready. It's a tremendous waste. So here, if you design something where only when the room is needed is it pulled into availability, that might be the design. These little lightning or these little flash symbols right here are indications that there may be a project opportunity. They're called Kaizen bursts. Again, you can look that through. Here are just a few of the VSM symbols. The Bart Simpson's hair right here, that's for a customer or supplier. I believe that's just supposed to be looking like a factory, but you can see it right there. Process steps are usually noted by that. There's my pull arrow. There's my electronic info flow. There's my push, my Kaizen burst, my inventory or queue, and then the data box, which you saw right here. Okay, and like I said, use these pretty sparingly. What I would say is that if you're going to use these sparingly, make sure that yes, process steps are used. I like these. I like putting inventory triangles in, and data boxes. I find are very helpful. Do I need to use a separate symbol for the customer or supplier? Sometimes it's helpful, but again, you have to be willing to talk it through. And the push and pull arrows, again, they're helpful, but only if the person is in the conversation. So you may want to prepare a simpler map for a presentation just so that people can see it and not get freaked out. Okay, I'm going to move on from value stream maps. That was just a very, 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 very high-level introduction to them. It seems that so many people and organizations have different ways of doing them. So just use this as a guideline, and I think you'll be in good shape. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about another thing that I call a waste walk. And a waste walk, I literally think of this. I literally think of my engineering days when I would take out my clipboard. I would go out to the factory floor or the plant floor, which obviously could be the floor of a hospital, or it could be the floor of where the people are doing their sales, or where they're at Connecticut, I'm thinking, or in the call center. And what I'm doing is I'm noting. I have categories for all these different things, and I'm noting where wastes are occurring. And I just use this model as something that helps me think of something. It just helps me think more specifically about waste than I have in the past. So in their book, The Machine That Changed the World, Womack and Jones, who are two lean gurus, they were the ones who originally went over, at least got the press on it, went over to Japan and studied over there and came back and said, this is what Toyota Production System really is about, and here are the things that they're doing. They identified 7 wastes. We'll talk about the 8th waste. I know that many people talk about the 8th waste today. I'm always wary of that one, of introducing it, but we'll maybe like to get some of your opinions on that. But let's start through and talk through. Here are the 7 wastes, and I remember them by remembering the acronym TIMWOOD. The wastes are transportation, moving goods around a lot. You can imagine, say, or it can be moving the patient around a lot, or papers around. But you can imagine if you're building, like if you're United Technologies and you're building jet engines, if you have to move that jet engine more than you need to, that's a tremendous amount of energy and cost and waste. Inventory. There's a tremendous amount of waste in inventories. If we're holding goods that we will never sell, that's a problem in finished inventory. If we're holding sub-assemblies, they can spoil, they can get stolen. So there's a lot of problems there. I think we all know what inventory is, and so we can talk through maybe an example. Motion. So here I'm talking about usually that's separate from transportation. So that might be people moving too much. I might have a poor work area designed, something like that. Waiting, those are also called delays. Okay. And then we've got a couple here that are interesting. Overproduction, which is literally making more than we need to make, making more than we can possibly sell. That's a tremendous waste. And overprocessing. So this is doing more than what we really need to do to satisfy customer needs. So this is overly complex processes and so forth. And then finally, defects. These are errors that somebody has made somewhere or something has made somewhere that we need to handle and take care of and rework. Okay. Now the 8th waste, I think usually people talk about unused, maybe put you there, unused creativity, or unused people potential. Now, I'd never have liked the labels. Sometimes people even say the 8th waste is people. I would really, if I were you, avoid that one, that language. But what we're really talking about here, and I think it's a good one, although I believe that in order to make it happen, you'll have to communicate it as another waste anyway. What we're really talking about here, I believe, is what we used to call back in the 80s empowerment. So in other words, I want my employees to be able to make decisions on the things that they are more qualified than I am to make decisions. If somebody has an idea for making this particular process better and they're real close to the process, we ought to be willing to listen to them and try it out, and to use their talents as SMEs, and to empower them to be able to say, yeah, I think that this might work. If you ever listen to, I should just mention this. If you've ever listened to, this is not an advertisement for this, although I do think it's fantastic, This American Life. It's a podcast. Ira Flatow, I think, is the person who does it, or maybe it's Ira Glass, one of those Iras. And there's an episode called Numi. Okay, and it's a podcast. It takes about an hour. Listen to the first half of it. It's fantastic. And it really shows how the contrast with people who, this was about a joint venture between Toyota and General Motors, so it really kind of teaches a lot of the concepts of Toyota production system at a high level. And what many of the American workers found that was amazing was when they went over to Japan, they were actually allowed to stop the production line if they saw problems, and to suggest what could be possible solutions for how they could do things better, how they could do things faster, and so forth. And that's what we're really talking about. So the waste here is a lot of times like, well, why we could be doing things better, we could be eliminating defects, we could be eliminating waiting, and we could be eliminating over processing, right? So if I have to submit something and then you as a manager have to come down and have to make a signature on something, that's going to take us a lot of time to do. All right. So talked a lot through this, but let me give you some examples. On transportation, for example, in an office, it may be too many approvals. May have to go. A document may have to go through too many signatures, and that can cause all sorts of delays as well. What we could think about is transportation. Or the classic example is kind of movement of material goods. In inventory, we can talk about the classic example, which would be excess work in progress or raw materials of unfinished or finished goods. But we could also be talking about excess marketing materials in an office, or excess reporting. I'm sure you all can relate to that. There's reports that we get that we don't read, and so forth. A classic example of motion might be poor employee layout to complete a task. Maybe that's mixing drugs at a pharmacy. I'm going to be careful there. Mixing drugs at a pharmacy, yes. Or the ergonomic design of a call center. But we can also be talking about sort of where do we arrange the printer, the fax, how we set up the cubes. Waiting, again, I think there are plenty of examples, but it could be queuing at a production machine because of too many batches, or it could be waiting for approvals, waiting for an agent response, a queuing at a call center, or at a lab that you're waiting you're queuing up patients in a waiting room at a lab. Overproduction, making products well before the customers want them, can lead to obsolescence or scrap. However, we could also, and a good example in an office would be completing valueless projects. If a project doesn't have any value, but we soldier on anyway, and we create it, and we create it, and fix it, and finish it. I think we've all kind of been on that one where I remember early in my quality career, I was on one of those projects where we actually did that, and everybody knew it was a waste of time, and at the end we actually got congratulated for the amount of work that we did and how great it was. All that wanted to make us do was leave. So it was an interesting thing. It would have been great if we had a process in our business that allowed us to very transparently come up and say, I think that here's a project that can be killed, and to have that go through that kill process, and yes, have it evaluated in the right way and have that project killed or stopped. Okay, over-processing can be extra handling, expediting. There can be a lot of waste from that in a typical, in a classic example, rework. But it could be in our office processes. It could be double, triple checking, multiple inspections. Could be excessive reporting, duplicating data entry. Oh, I know that goes on in so many different places where there's multiple Excel spreadsheets. And a classic example for defects, non-conforming product, but it could be order entry errors or errors in invoicing. So all of these things kind of go both ways. They're both in Office and the classical example. I don't think many of us have a problem with that. So try it out. WasteWalk is a great way to go through a process, take out the clipboard, and just write some things down. And it doesn't really matter if you write something as transportation and then later you change your mind and say, no, you know what, that really is delay waste. That's okay. It doesn't matter. The important thing is to identify it. And these are just different categories that can help you identify wastes in the first place. Okay. I want to take you through one other thing that I have found very helpful, and that's called process analysis. And the picture of it is given right here. But I want to walk through a specific example because you actually have a template. So I'm going to show you what this template looks like. Here's the process analysis template that you guys have. I've given to you. And there's a blank. That's really blank. There's a blank, and there's an example that's, oh, hold on. Oh, this is kind of interesting. I've got it mixed up. So the label on here, that's my bad. Just so you know, in the template that you've got, example is the blank one. So this is the one that you would start with, and you would fill in your own process name and enter in the various things. But let me take you through the example here on the other sheet. So this is an example of one that's filled out. And I should say that if you're taking some notes, this is an analysis that you would not do first. So this is a very detailed analysis that maybe after you've done a cursory waste walk, you've done a process map, a simple process map, maybe you want to get some details on where the different wastes are and so forth. And so the example that's here is a customer rep in a call center looks up a number in an Excel file, puts on her headset, dials a number, has a conversation. So very detailed, right? This is the opposite of the high-level stuff that we looked at before. Has a conversation with a prospective customer, prints a document asking for the prospective customer's signature, walks to the printer, waits for a printout, walks back, puts the printer. Okay, you get it. Okay? So each of those things is then detailed in here. And it's labeled, the first thing is, it's labeled and categorized as either a process activity, transportation, inspection, delay, or storage. And yes, you simply double-click on that and color the thing that you want. So for example, the first 5 things are process steps. We will then note how long it takes to do each of these. This looks like it's in seconds. And then we'll label these as value-added, non-value added, or this last column is what's called business required, non-value added. And I just put a 1 in whatever one they are. So for example, if I wanted to say that this was value added, which means it's important to the customer, or if we didn't do it, it's necessary to either as a requirement, or it transforms the service in a fundamental way. That might be value added, and you see when I put in the 1 there as opposed to the other, it changed that graph over here. All right, let me just put it back to what it was. I write down the time, and I label it as value added or non-value added and so forth. And this just shows us essentially how much time is value added, how much time is non-value added, gives a nice little picture for that, and helps us understand where in the process where we might make those improvements. So for example, here's a customer conversation. You might say, well, that takes up a lot of time, but it's value added. So maybe we don't want to start there. Maybe we want to start with all of these steps right here, the walking to the printer, the waiting for the printout, the walk to the office, because all of these are either transportation or delay, and they're all non-value added. Okay? So it just gives us a clear picture for how we might want to proceed, and also it gives us a nice communication tool for saying, for communicating to management as well as to people who are in the process. Anyway, this isn't something that I see an awful lot of people doing, and I think that you'll find that it's a neat little tool. All right. So even though I've provided this in the reading material, I would be remiss if I didn't spend a minute to talk a little bit about value-added, non-value-added, and business-required non-value-added. Everybody has different definitions. I'm going to give you mine. Essentially, we used to just have value-added, non-value-added, and value-added was simply it transformed the product in a fundamental way, or it was necessary to deliver to the customer, and non-value-added was anything else. But then, many people wanted to add another thing that was, for example, business required. So it's required by a regulator. Say it's something that's required from a regulator, but it's not value added. Some people might say a lot of the HIPAA regulations are non-value added. I would want to question that, but a lot of people would say that. So things that were there that you had to satisfy HIPAA for might be like signature on a document from a customer. Any delays that were from that might be a non-value added, and so forth. It might be a business required non-value added. Anyway, some people have actually put in things that are called value enabling instead of business required non-value added. I would shy away from those. I would consider those to be generally non-value added unless they really are transforming something in a fundamental way that you couldn't do without. But the important thing is really what I do like about business required non-value added is that by saying something is required by the business constraints or by current technology or by regulators, it allows you to then, as a black belt or green belt, question that and go back and say, is it really required? Has anything changed? If so, that may be a way that we can really make a difference. Okay, process analysis. Great little tool, and it's a nice little picture that goes along with it. And you have that template in your template directory. Okay. Oops. All right, the last one I want to talk to is something called 5S. And this is another tool that is just so generally applicable. You'll want to you'll want to use it in many cases. And if anybody has seen the show Hoarders, not really a fan of that show, but if you've seen it, a lot of how they clean things up could be, they use some of these 5S concepts in that. Okay, the 5S's are, and basically these come from Japanese words that also were S words, so it's just a rough translation, but we'll explain what each of those are sort, set in order, shine, some people say systematically clean, standardize, and sustain. And let's talk through what they are and how something might proceed. So sort essentially just says separate out what you need from what you don't. Okay, so if you come into a, you know what, we'll talk through an example very quickly. Set in order, find a place for everything. So another thing that people might say is a place for everything and everything in its place. Okay, that's what set in order means. Okay, shine literally means clean it. Okay, standardized means not only am I going to do it, but other people are going to clean and put things away in the same way. And then sustain means sustain is really about, honestly, it's about metrics. Metrics and checking. we're not only going to have a standardized way, we're going to check to see whether those standards are met, and we're going to monitor it over time. So it's really about monitoring. Okay, let's go through an example of this. Suppose that you're like me and you have a garage that's not in order, that could use maybe a little 5S'ing. How would you go about that? Well, you'd start by saying, okay, the first thing I want to do is say, there's an order to this, right? So it literally does go in this order. The first thing you'd want to do is to say, let me find all the things I want to keep, all the things I want to get rid of, and put them in 2 separate piles, and then I'm going to get rid of the things I don't want. Now, we all know that usually you put things in 3 piles. You put things in get rid of, maybe keep, and keep. Right? This is maybe, this is throw out, and this is keep. All right. So you might put them into each 3, but eventually you want to essentially get them into keep. I'm going to keep it, or I'm going to not keep it. Okay, I'm going to get rid of it. All right. So I might say, you know, the old bins that have my old sporting goods equipment from 20 years ago, I don't need those anymore. I'm going to donate those to the local a local YMCA or something like that, and I can get rid of them that way. The second thing is, all right, now that I know what I'm going to keep, I want a place to keep I want to keep all the sporting goods here. I want to keep my lawn equipment there. I want to keep my tools in a different place. Okay, so that's the second part. And again, you can apply this to a kitchen. You can apply it to a garage, anywhere. Now the third thing is that now that I've got everything cleaned up, now that I've got everything organized, let me take some time to make sure I can clean that empty space in between. And I literally mean that. I'm going to clean it. And the reason is because now I've got some emotional baggage. Now that I've got it clean, I've got some emotional baggage. When it gets dirty again, I'm feeling it much more. Right? So the more I can keep it clean, the more I can see it getting out of order. And it's also going to be easier to do. All right. So that's the 3S, and a lot of people are really good at that. What a lot of people are not good at is the back end, which is the standardize, which is creating a consistent approach. So that means that not only am I going to put the basketballs where the basketballs belong, but my son is going to do it too, and my daughter's going to do it, and my wife's going to do it, and we all agree that this is the place where the basketballs belong, this is the place where the rakes belong, and so forth. Okay, this part is harder. Standardizing is harder. And finally, sustain. At that point, we want to ensure that the approach is followed. So once I've got a standard approach and everybody agrees to it, maybe we can check once a week or once a month or once a year or whatever is the proper frequency to make sure it keeps happening. So that's 5S. Now, there's a lot to it. If you Google 5S, or if you don't, I'm sorry, if you read it in the book, you'll see lots of other stuff that's on it. Like, you know, here's what 5S looks like in the beginning of an organization. Here's what it looks like after they've done it for 2 years. Here's what it looks like in the end state. You'll see that. You'll see some examples, and you'll see lots of neat little tricks that people can use to make sure that things stay in order. I might want to also add that some people talk about 6S, and the 6S is usually safety. This seems to be a healthcare trend. So I see this in a lot of, like for example, U.S. Oncology did it. I know in talking with John in our one-on-one, John mentioned that you're doing it at Baptist or did it at a previous place. So it doesn't, at least in my mind, it hasn't fit into like this specific order of things. You're probably going to be considering safety all throughout that. But anyway, just in case you see 6S, that's what it is. Let me show you an example, a good example of what we might mean from 6S. And this is like your grandfather's thing, right? Your grandfather had the tools. But here we've got an outline. We've got a board with an outline for the tools, so we can tell at a glance what's missing. We can see, for example, there's something missing here, and these things are set up so that you know what goes in each of the places. Very obvious. Okay, so that's just an example of something that might help to keep the place clean and help you understand what's missing and what's not. Making it visual is kind of a key here. I worked with one company where, now this is getting out of vogue now, but let me see if I can go to, there we go, where they had a bookshelf and they constantly had these binders that were out that they needed. And what they decided upon was a system where, and I intentionally left some space on the end. Maybe they put a bookmark there, but they put tape across it and then cut the tape so that they could tell when one of these books was missing and which book. And if you can imagine, like 26 of these, when one was pulled, they can immediately see like which book was missing, and it was pretty cool. But anyway, you can apply 5S to all sorts of things: your desktop, a file share. That's what I've mostly seen it. Shared drives, you name it. It's a great tool. Okay, and this is kind of what we're there's some more detail on set and sort and order and shine and all that stuff. Okay, just be aware that 3S is usually what I see done. I see a lot of people kind of cleaning things up, but then it goes back into disuse. Why is that? Because this is the tough stuff. This is really the getting the buy-in, the behavioral part of it, and the change management part. Okay, so there are a number of different exercises. There's 3 exercises you'll have in the next assignment. One is about a value stream. Why don't you actually take a stab and do one of these? Another is to waste walk a process. Could be your own process in your house or apartment. Or to do a process analysis. Or if you like, you can do both, which I think would be very helpful. And then one is actually talking about 5S. And having you do it. And there's no substitute for doing it and learning it that way. Okay. So I want to stop at this moment and ask you what questions do you have on what we covered thus far. We covered 3 what I think are very, very important tools. So we covered some nuts and bolts. Nuts and bolts tools. We covered the value stream map, and remember that we just touched the surface on that. We covered the waste walk, which is really you're taking out that clipboard and you're walking on the floor and you're looking at all those 7 or the 8 wastes if you count unused creativity, which remember is really just empowerment. We talked about process, what I call process analysis. Boy, I said that like a Michigander. Process analysis. All right, and finally we talked about 5S. They're very nuts and bolts tools in Lean.